Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And of course, for a business to be successful, it needs to grow. But we all aren't quite sure how to do that. And oh, good golly, can we even do it during a pandemic? Well, of course you can, and you don't have to be the size of Amazon to be doing this. And so we're going to have a lot of fun talking to my guest today about how to grow your business, pandemic or no pandemic. You know what? You can grow your business no matter what. So please join me in welcoming Cliff Farrah to our program today. Welcome, Cliff.
Hey, Deb, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Doing spectacular, and thank you for coming on. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into this. So Cliff Farrah is president, CEO, and chairman of the board at the Beacon Group and a pioneer in the field of growth strategy consulting. Cliff founded Beacon in 2001, immediately after the tragedy of September 11th, with the goal to help his clients recover, regroup, and heal through business and economic growth. A 30-year veteran of the management consulting industry, Cliff has grown Beacon to become one of the world's premier growth strategy consulting firms. Under his leadership, the firm has studied trillions with a T of dollars in global market opportunities and delivered over 1,500 projects for over 50 Fortune 200 clients. Wow, that's like a whole bunch of them across major industry verticals in 85 foreign markets. His new book, Growing the Top Line, will be released later on this year, celebrating the 20th anniversary of the firm. So again, Cliff, welcome.
Thanks again, Deb. That's quite a walk down memory lane there.
Well, let's get even a little bit more of that. I always like talking to my guests and finding out how it is that they got where they are today, and how you really did discover that this is your passion in life.
Yeah, so probably a fairly typical story for most people in the services world. Graduated college, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, and I was lucky enough to work for a gentleman by the name of David Maister. And David is an author. He's also an author. He's also a consultant. He was a former Harvard Business School prof, and he consulted to consulting firms. So he's written about 5 books on how to manage services firms. And I had an opportunity to work with him and learned that I really enjoyed matching wits with smart people. And so that, was what led me to go to B school and then to have a career where I spent a lot of time working in different domains in the services world until I found myself working at a company called A.T. Kearney. And at A.T. Kearney, where I worked, they were very cost focused. And, business is profit is revenue minus cost, right? So that's the profit equation. And cost is really easy in the services world to do. No, I say easy, it's easier, right? You can measure it, right, how much you've saved, how you saved it. It's very well tracked. Revenue is infinite and very amorphous. And so firms, when I was cutting my teeth, didn't really focus too much on the revenue side of things. They worried a lot about the cost side of things, which is great until you lay off a whole bunch of people to make your number. And, we did that. And I had this moment of epiphany where that's not how I wanted to make my living. So I started to think about this limitless thing called growth that could create jobs, not take jobs away, and started to get a little bit smart about it. And by the time 9/11 happened, I was at this point in my career where I was seriously considering starting my own firm. And I was supposed to be on the second plane that went into the towers. And I canceled the night before. Yeah.
Wow.
And right. And so, my wife looked at me, my bride looked at me, and she said, life's too short. You need to
You just got a really big signal there.
take the plunge. Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
Take the plunge. And so, so I started, this will be 20 years in business. We started later this year, started the firm, and really thought long and hard about how we could add the most value. And we knew that there were different parts of the economy that were just traumatized. Travel industry, there are a lot of similarities between then and now with respect to travel.
Yeah. Nobody was going to get on an airplane. We weren't going to go to a football game, all of those various things.
Yeah, that's right. And so, anyway, started the firm, and it's been a great ride. As you say, we've been able to carve out a really nice niche for ourselves in the market, and look forward to talking about kind of what we do and sharing a little bit of insight for your viewers.
Right. And you obviously consult with the very large of the very large, but it's the same principles, whether you're a one-person shop or, the multi-gazillion dollar companies.
That's right.
And part of it is we just, we have to have planned, we have to have strategy, all of those various things. But, as we mentioned, you have to have growth. And I love this comment from your book. Growth is an infinite game with the revenue line limited only by your ability to convince new or existing customers to buy the products or services you currently or will produce. I mean, that it doesn't get much more simple than that. And I think that's what is so confusing is we make it into this huge, complicated process. I mean, there's people who have either bought from you or will buy from you, and then you've got products you already have and products that you will have. That's it, and that's really what it comes down to. And so growth is, of course, increasing those.
That's right. And what you just laid out there, I think really well is the sources of revenue. So it's very well bounded, right? There are really only two variables, and that's who you sell to and what they buy that determine where revenue comes from. And I think what we've found is and it's certainly true independent of business. You're right. You can be a small business, you can be a larger business, you can be a mid-sized business. Figuring out who you're selling to and what you're going to sell them, and how to make that happen profitably initially, and then as an ongoing concern, how you defend and grow your core is a true piece of physics that all companies have to worry about.
Right. And it is confusing because, of course, there are obviously lots more things in there. Costs are the big thing. You can't, you might be making good revenue and growing, but if your costs are out of whack, then you're not going to have that little thing called profit. And profit really is, you have to have profit. Ultimately, I mean, there's a lot of businesses that run in the red for quite a while and for a variety of reasons. But yeah, you have to get those other things under control too. Yeah,
I think that's right. One of the biggest differences you see is that larger companies are very good at managing the financial side of the equation. They're very formulaic in how they think about opportunities and judge them against one another. Smaller businesses, I think, are more passionate. They you're doing what you love.
It's their baby.
Yeah. What's funny, I think, though, is that that's also true in large companies as well, especially in the engineering side of the house. You get people. I was talking with a client of ours, a guy named Marty Curran, who's just this brilliant strategist, and Marty's the chief innovation officer for Corning Inc. And Corning is it's a great company. They do some amazing science, but they flunk a lot of projects. So it's not unusual to be an engineer at Corning and have spent the last 2 years of your life slaving over a technology that's your baby, right? It's your unique approach to thought, and to have it, killed. What I like about Corning, though, and I think people can take a lesson from this in all different sizes of companies, is they celebrate the death. Right. So in October, near about Halloween, they have a party where people who have had their projects killed get to stand on stage and they get a trophy, and they talk about why it died, and then they put it on a shelf, and they wait until someone needs it. They dust it off and they put a wrapper around it, and then they bring it to market to monetize. So, knowing when to pivot, knowing when things aren't working out financially, knowing when it's time to stop is something that smaller companies need to get better at.
Right. Yeah, and of course, the biggest lessons that we can learn are from the things that fail.
Oh yeah.
And that's, that's frequently the problem is, we nurtured this product, we nurtured this service, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work, and we're crushed. Oh, good golly,
Sure.
and then the problem is, especially if you're a small business owner, you put your heart and soul into that, and you're so crushed that you don't go forward. And I think that ends up being one of the biggest problems is people just, they give up.
Yeah. It's interesting. Failure, failure is the great teacher.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about your life and you think about the things you talk about when you get together with your friends and you're
Mm-hmm.
reminiscing, sometimes it's about the wins. I mean, the wins
Right.
are always great,
Oh yeah.
but mostly it's about that time something just went wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone broke a leg, or someone,
Mm-hmm.
got drunk, or, whatever silly thing happened in your
Mm-hmm.
life. Same sort of thing in business. You
Mm-hmm.
find yourself talking about and thinking about failures. And, I think failing early and in small ways
Mm-hmm.
is probably better than failing big late stage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another sort of behavior that I think
Mm-hmm.
is good for smaller companies to think about.
Right. And clearly you have to look at it and really figure out why it failed. Was it, because there's so many different reasons why something fails,
Yeah.
but a big portion of it, I mean, we mentioned the fact that it has to be, there has to be somebody who's going to buy it. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people think is, oh my gosh, I've invented the greatest thing since sliced bread. The entire world is going
Right.
to want to buy it.
Right.
And we discover, ooh, maybe not so much.
Yeah. So we talk about it a little bit in the book, and it's an absolute truth of product development that either you are trying to meet an unmet need in the market. That is, you've studied the market, you've done your, customer intelligence work, you understand, that they have a need that's not being met, and you build something to meet that need. Right.
Right.
That's one way to go about it. The second sort of area I think you just talked about is market creation, where you've come up with something that hasn't yet existed in the world, that suddenly you expect to transform
Right.
The world. And that's a very hard lift, because we were talking about risk mitigation. So when you think about market creation, you have to define a concept, you have to make people aware of a concept, you have to show them the functional benefit of it, you have to show them where they can get it, you can make sure that they can afford it, then you have to sustain it afterwards, and you want to herald success and have it build from this tiny little fire into a big bonfire, right? Versus, hey, there's a fire already burning over here, it's a burning fire, it just you can throw wood on it and go for a ride. And that's really the one of the challenges you have if you're in love with your idea. If you're in love with your idea, it's hard to acknowledge that you're going to fight upstream, and it's a harder fight than it needs to be potentially, if you're going to something like that.
And I mean, there are times where products just skyrocket and you're thinking, what the heck? Pet rock. I mean, I remember when people paid lots of money to buy a pet rock. It was a rock. There was nothing special, but I think some of them might have had faces on them or something. But I mean, it was a rock. Or, the guy who invented the pool noodle. You got to wonder, what was going through his mind. That's probably, and it was probably one of those things. It's exactly like what you were talking about, where it was created for one reason, but actually got used for a different reason. And I mean, and obviously that happens all the time, where people are like, holy schmoly, what if we take this and turn it into this?
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of thoughts on this. You'll find entrepreneurs who do well with a single product, and then they sell that product, and then they're ready to go do their next thing, and they can't find it. They were in the right place at the right time. It fell in their lap. They were just, the timing was perfect. The difference between that and a large corporation, a Fortune 50 company, is that the Fortune 50 company has a process to continually innovate and study and identify that next thing. And it's something that is difficult to do when you're resource constrained as an entrepreneur. But it's necessary if you're going to do more than just get by with that one thing, whatever that one thing was.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, timing is everything in the market, though, and you're right. Fads are very tough to predict. Sustainability, core values of a product, defensible position in a market. Those are things you might see more interesting to larger companies.
Right.
So,
yeah. And then we have weird things like the pandemic, like September 11th, where you can and should plan for crisis, and whether that's you're thinking, okay, I mean, small business, a crisis could be their hard drive dies. What are you going to do? Okay, well, everything I back up onto the cloud, all of these various things. I mean, you should have some type of crisis management in process, and in place, no matter what size company you are. But you can't plan on planes that hit the World Trade Center. You certainly can't plan on a worldwide pandemic. But when you've got those plans in place, then it is a little bit easier for you to hopefully survive.
Yeah, that's tough. So you said a lot there. Let me see if I can unpack a little bit from my perspective.
I do that. I crunch a whole bunch into.
You did. It was good. First, I think if you speak with epidemiologists, they've been predicting pandemics for quite a while.
Oh yeah. I mean, Mother Nature gets annoyed at us every
once
in a while.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of things like that, like post 9/11, there was this awareness that we were exposed to different kinds of terrorist attacks, right? That we could have had a recurring event, they call them adverse events. We would have had a recurring adverse event. And what happens is, to prevent those things, you have to spend a lot of money.
Right.
And it's not clear where that money is going to come from.
Right.
So example, I think in the aftermath of 9/11, there was this well understood fear about an attack from a thing known as a manpad. And a manpad is a man-portable device, which is like a Stinger missile. We made a bunch of them. They got out in the world, and
because you wanted to make money, so you made that product and you sold it.
Right. And so it turned out at the time that there were systems that could defend planes against this. They were pretty expensive, and they were in the Air Force, chaff-driven things and laser-driven things, all this kind of cool stuff. But the reality is there was no money.
Right.
The risk was so small, and the actuaries did the study that they made the decision not to this defense.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of playing of the odds that happens by business, both large and small. Small businesses, it may be, my town won't get flooded. My street won't get flooded. I'm not going to spend that extra on flood insurance. Or it's rare that a car is going to ram through my front window of my store. So I don't have to really worry too much about that. So there is that kind of stuff. I think what's funny about, not funny, what people probably don't appreciate about the response to this pandemic is it could have been a lot worse. Here's what I mean by that. You brought up two things, and we're doing one of them right now. So you said cloud. Okay, the good news about cloud is it lets you work remotely. So the infrastructure for the first time in our history existed for us to work remotely.
Right. For businesses to shut down on Friday and people to work from home on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that happened, Deb, is this video conferencing capability. Now this existed post 9. If you remember post 9/11, when the industry was the travel industry was tanking, people were, it was the first real step in this direction of video conferencing. And
I remember the company I worked with bought all the equipment so that we didn't have to travel for a variety of reasons. I mean, that was where they put together the numbers and went, ooh, we can pay for this equipment with 5 trips that somebody would have made.
That's totally right. And now the difference was you could still go into the office. So what we weren't doing was saying, don't go into the office.
Right.
So we've had this second tier disruption from the pandemic that's requiring us all to work from home. But thanks to really smart technical companies and infrastructure that we've built out, we now have the infrastructure to support cloud and video. And we have the embedded cameras that are allowing us to do this. And then from a practitioner standpoint, I mean, how does it feel that you can look over my shoulder and, see my life?
Yeah.
And I can look over yours and see yours. That we never had that before.
Right. Because it wasn't professional.
Exactly right. So what's happening, I think, is that we're interacting more as humans now. And there's a value and a benefit in that as we conduct business and get to know one another better, which is totally counterintuitive. You think, oh, I got to be there and press the flesh and, meet that person and have lunch and all that good stuff. Not so much. We actually transition pretty well. The other technology that has really hit its stride and sort of made the pandemic better than it could have been is telemedicine and care at a distance. That's a really big thing that relies on a lot of the same infrastructure, but it's still creating markets and opportunities for companies to to serve in the market, and that's big and small companies. So I think I think you're right. It's difficult to plan for all of these bad events. And I think, unless you're a futurist who makes their living trying to just think about everything that could go sideways on you.
And who wants to live like that?
You'll never be able to, right? You'll never be able to. So much better to, be able to pivot. And I think that's really what we've seen companies that are successful right now doing.
Right.
They're pivoting to better understanding their customers' wants and needs, right? They're pivoting to new ways to engage with customers. They're smarter about following the money. Where is there an economic opportunity? So all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Anyway, sorry to ramble. I rambled.
Oh, no. This is a fascinating discussion. And what's been interesting to me are the companies that we've seen three different type of companies through the pandemic. The ones that failed. And that's horrible, that's awful, that's tragic. There are the ones that are still just kind of hanging on by their toenails or by their fingernails on the diving board, right? And then there are those that grew. Now, companies like Amazon, once they got the shipping infrastructure thing worked out, and they still have glitches with that, because things like cold. I mean, I had some stuff shipped over the weekend that was delayed, and how spoiled are we that we have to have it overnight, right? But because it was too cold, and so they once those things work out, and those are kind of ongoing, but the companies that went, okay, we had this product, but now we need to do something different, and in particular, I'm thinking of the companies that all of a sudden shifted, pivoted, whatever we're going to call it, and started mass producing masks, started mass producing hand sanitizer. I mean, when distilleries are figuring, people might not be buying our bourbon right now, except, we do kind of need it, and started producing hand sanitizer. I mean, all of these various things. So that comes back to exactly what we were saying at the start, find that product, find that service, and go for it. And I mean, it really did amaze me, the companies that just completely and totally, and I shouldn't say that because they didn't switch. They just changed what they were doing to a different product, but everything they were doing, for the most part stayed the same. They were able to produce, they had the resources to be able to do it. They just went, ooh, we think we're going to make masks now.
Yeah. What'll be interesting is how sustainable that business is.
Right. Because hopefully we're not going to be wearing masks forever, or
I can't wait to get my shot. I'm ready to get it. But yeah, no, I think, history has a lot of lessons from companies that made pivots like that, that those companies who did pivot should be looking at. So, go back to World War II. Companies repurposed entirely to support the war effort. And then post the war effort, after they had not only shifted their product mix, but they had scaled infrastructure to meet demand, they were stuck with overhead. Right. And so, as companies make these moves, they have to be really thoughtful to when they're going to step off the train and get back to their business, or fundamentally, have we now shifted away from a bourbon distillery to,
Mhm.
you know, we're now a medical supply company, right? That's a legitimate pivot that you could make. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I'm also impressed by companies that are in struggling industries and have reinvented themselves a little bit. So, you look at Uber as a great example.
Right. We weren't going to business meetings anymore.
No. I still remember my last Uber ride. I was in New Orleans, and the gentleman who picked us up had all the windows down and a bottle of aerosol spray Lysol.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, this just makes people feel more comfortable. And I haven't Ubered in a while, but I understand they're continuing to work on that front. But Uber Eats has emerged.
Oh yeah,
and
they couldn't drive people, so they were going to drive food.
Yeah. So they looked at what their capabilities were from a functional standpoint, and then translated that into new markets. So yeah, that's a classic pivot that you would hope to see. I think it'll be interesting to see the real estate market. Right? Corporate real estate,
especially commercial.
Yeah, commercial real estate is very tricky right now. But what's also interesting is, we have a bit of a housing shortage. So are we going to see repurposing of commercial real estate into apartment units? Maybe, I don't know. It'll be fun to watch. Like as bad as this economic environment is, it's incredible if you sit back and just study it a little bit, the things that are occurring.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned real estate. On a radio program that I listened to this morning, they were talking about this is the lowest nationwide inventory in many, many, many years.
Yeah.
And there's, a variety of reasons for that. But one of the biggest things that I think so many people are going to be looking at is, exactly what we've been saying. You don't have to be in that city anymore to be working for that company. And so, how much exodus from large cities are we going to see? Are they going to go, I do not want to deal with Atlanta traffic in the slightest. I'm going to move to Birmingham, or, all of these various things. As long as where you're moving to has good Wi-Fi, you can pretty much be anywhere.
So I'll give you a couple of data points. One is, when we made the shift as a firm to remote, I was very much of the mindset, look, I don't care where it is, exactly your point, right? As long as you have high speed connectivity and the ability to make calls, then I don't care where you are.
Right.
I had people go as far as the beach in Puerto Rico. I had to go to Washington State, just spread across the country. And then we were doing a study, and we were looking at infrastructure build out. And it turned out that fiber to the home, which is still it's something I've been working on for a long time, but it's still an emerging technology in many ways, was driving purchase prices. So if you were on people were researching if you were on the fiber development line, and if so, they were buying real estate in advance of that, and then flipping it to people who are trying to make an exodus from cities. So yeah, you're spot on. I think that's right.
Right. And it's not only going to expand our workforce here, I mean, now really worldwide, and I mean, we'd seen that before, particularly from a cost standpoint. Call centers, great example. You outsource those to various other places. But now, I mentioned to you that I interviewed somebody for this program last week, and his program has since aired between when you and I are doing this. But he lives in Vietnam now. He said it's gorgeous. He loves it there. He is Australian, and he said he can work from there just fine. And I've talked to people before the pandemic who were nomads. They were in their RVs, and most campgrounds have great Wi-Fi now.
Sure.
And so you've got all of that. So there were people who were doing that before. A lot of millennials, which I found very interesting, because especially if either their kids were so young that they didn't have to worry about it, or I mean, they could homeschool. And now, okay, homeschooling is pretty much the norm.
Yeah.
If even if your kids are back in school, it's a hybrid, where it is an option. Or, I mean, there's just total, homeschooling options that are opening up more and more. And so they've got those. And then things like, a friend of mine, he's been doing that. It actually is her brother. She was talking about the fact that he has been doing the thing where he just goes from place to place,
Right.
and he finds an Airbnb, one of those, and he tells them, I want your house for a month to 2 months. You don't have to come in and do anything during that time. And so I'm going to pay you a reduced rate, but I want, and so he's gone to some of the coolest places, been there for a month to 2 months, gets his work done, and, is paying less than what he'd be paying for mortgage. So, I think there's going to be so many people that are thinking, wow, the opportunities now are so great. And so that's where companies really, to go back to it, what is that product that you either provide now or that you can develop and provide that's going to help with that growth? And I think the growth really is, it's exciting to be thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I think the example you just gave about, it wasn't exactly a van life example, but I think you were talking about the, that culture,
Yep.
the emergence of that demographic, psychographic kind of a profile, right? That embraces this notion of minimalism and, values the experience of life.
Right.
That's a persona. And so the question is, as a small business or even a large business, how do I serve that persona?
Right.
So you might see in that particular domain, I happen to know there's been this emergence of higher end vehicles,
right,
that have emerged, right? So these really plussed up things for
that aren't for the people who are 80 and up.
yeah. So right. So that there is within that demographic a higher income demographic. That's part of it. You also see rural areas like farms starting to set aside spots on their property for transient folks to live. And so, they're trying to adapt their revenues to the changing wants and needs of potential customers. So, I mean, the pandemic caused a whole bunch of flux, and we're going to be sifting through it for years. I mean, if you're from Colorado, when a big storm hits Colorado, once that storm's gone, let's say you got, 2-3 feet of snow, you've got that through the spring. If you're in Florida and a hurricane hits, you could be dealing with that for 2-3 years. This pandemic dwarfs that, right. and it's global. So while we all want to get back to normal, there's going to be this period of time where there are a bunch of back eddies in the currents and a lot of unforeseen outcomes as governments around the world try to get their people back on their feet. And I think, certainly phase one, getting the vaccines distributed and used in time to prevent new emergent strains that are vaccine resistant is really important, right? Then I think there's going to be this decision, and it's going to be, instead of a reactive decision, I think it's going to be a practical decision. What did we like about this work from home world? Right. Remote education. Should we keep doing that? How about remote healthcare? Is that something we should do? What about this? No more going to the damn grocery store. You're gonna I'm gonna keep doing that. I love that. Right. Just hit order what you did last week.
It saves money because I'm not going, ooh, I have to buy that too. Right.
Yeah. Well, and so to that point, what does that mean to retailers? So the entire experience in a grocery store is engineered to get you to be aware of and potentially consuming more stuff than you thought you needed when you walked through the door. Right. So now that you have professional shoppers, does that shift to the online environment that you're shopping in? Yeah, it probably does.
Yeah. I mean, so Amazon has done that for years. You recently bought this. Maybe you'd be interested in this.
Sure. So I think smaller businesses, depending on what they do, medium-sized businesses, depending on the segments that they operate in, are all going to be presented with these ways to potentially grow their top line in very non-traditional ways. And being thoughtful about when it's time to pivot and when to invest is something we talk about in the book.
Right. And I mean, for those who really are thinking and thinking about, gee, how can we get through this? I mean, we're not going to go back to normal. That's not going to exist. And part of that is because so much damage was done. And I'm not fond of that word because, as we've been saying, there've been so many good things that have come of this too. But, it's not going to be, 1999 again. We're not going to go back to how we functioned then, because we did think, wow, I like this working from home thing, but I miss my networking. So how can I do a combination of those?
Sure.
Hey, people aren't going into grocery stores. So how do we deal with the fact that there really aren't impulse buys anymore? All of those various things. And I think that is really what makes this interesting. I mean, the people who truly relied on going to those networking meetings, going to those conferences, all of those various things, making sales calls. I can't imagine being any type of salesperson that really, whether you went to a business, and tried to get them to purchase something, or they came to you, whether it's retail, car, whatever it was. I mean, that's just going to be totally changed. People are going to go back to it to some degree, but we're also getting spoiled. Like you said, I mean, I kind of like not going into a grocery store anymore.
Yeah. I think you're right. The hardest thing for a consultant is to be wrong about stuff, right? Like, we don't like to be wrong. And yet, we had to go to our clients in a number of industries. Well, actually in every, I take it back. Every industry that we served, we had to go back to our clients in the beginning of 2020 and say, all that work we did for you last year,
right,
that you paid us all that money for, throw it out, right? Don't make decisions based on that data. And so for a number of them, it became a very tactical, okay, how are things shifting right now? How do we need to respond? For others, you talked about the three categories. We call it drown, bob, and surf. You're either drowning, you're bobbing in the water, or you're surfing.
That's because you're a sailor. I didn't mention that. You are a competitive sailor.
It's true. But what I think is true is that there are some companies that can't keep up with demand right now, right? And there are the PPE manufacturers saw a swell of demand in what historically was a pretty mundane, predictable kind of market,
right?
And so their challenge is going to be what we talked about, which is how do I know when I should slow down, or how do I know when things are going to fall off the cliff? The how you engage with your customer, that's a big one. We actually have a chapter in the book where one of the headlines says, you probably don't know how to talk to your customer anymore, right? Like, that's one of the impacts of the pandemic, is you just don't know the cadence, you don't know the content, and you have to embrace that and know that it's okay, that nobody knows, and that you have to sort of figure it out and figure out what works for you as you engage with them. So, I'd agree with that.
And we really have to adapt. There are still some people that are like, I don't like this video stuff. And medical. I mean, that really is a great example. I was talking to my mom yesterday. She's 88 years old, still lives completely on her own. And she made an appointment with somebody, and this was several months ago. And they said, now this will be telemedicine. And she said, I don't think so. Now, my mother texts, she has a smartphone, and so it's, she's not, she's actually fairly atypical for someone her age, but she said, no, I want to see my doctor in the same room with me. And, and the doctor was smart enough to say, okay, what time do you want to come in? in some cases they've just absolutely said no, but to do a combination, I mean, people who've listened to the program before know that I've had some kind of ongoing health issues. I have had my shots.
Good for you. Congratulations.
But I have one doctor that every time he says, now, which do you want? Are we doing in person or are you coming in?
Yeah.
And I say, I'd like to come in, and so, I mean, clearly I'm a social person. I just like to do that. But, there are some things that I think, some doctors are still going to have to do that. But, I mentioned, that I grew up in very, very rural Colorado. The closest hospital was and still is 65 miles away in a different state. And so telemedicine is phenomenal for that area. Because it's just something that, you can get treatment, and clearly, I mean, there are times where, you have to call the ambulance, you have to go, I mean, all those various things. But if it's, I've had this cough, the telemedicine works great. And so the organizations that have adapted or sprung up, I mean, and are offering that, I mean, that's just a fabulous thing.
Yeah, I think so. When we started this discussion, you said timing's everything, right? Like those companies that were in the right place at the right time. There's this amazing confluence of facts that is happening right now when you think about telemedicine, right? We have an aging population. The caregivers of that aging population, by and large, are fairly comfortable with technology. Right? We don't, we can monitor our house remotely when we're on a trip. Why can't we monitor our parents? Right? So there's that fluency with technology that the caregivers have that's transformative, right? That's a big pillar of success. There is the fidelity and accessibility of two-way video and the doctor's ability to look you in the eye while they're remote. But sorry, and then the third thing is that they're getting paid to do it, which is for the first time ever in our
the insurance company reimburses for it,
at least in the U.S. That's right. It's the CMS, the Medicare and Medicaid has decided to reimburse, and not just within a state, but also across state lines. In the example you just gave, which was another barrier. But so there's money, and people follow the money, and then we have tech savvy caregivers, and we have capability. That's the crawl, right? That's the crawl. What's happening with our clients now who are working in this domain looking forward is they're thinking about an entirely different standard of care. So imagine if it's 5 times better outcomes because you use telemedicine versus going into the doctor's office.
Right.
So now you start to collide artificial intelligence and its ability to sense pain, right? To read micro expressions on your face or to hear a tone in your voice, stress level. Maybe it's able to analyze your background. Maybe it looks at the behavior that you've demonstrated because you've been carrying your phone around for a while. Maybe it looks at your online things, right? So there are a whole bunch of things that could be done that are pending that are going to be transformative in the standard of care.
Right.
And I think that's going to drive a lot of interest as well. So it's not just cost avoidance, but it's also, the quality of life improvement that you might see.
Right.
And one thing that was surprising to me, and I know, a lot of your listeners will know this, or your viewers will know this. When I first started working in healthcare, and telemedicine is something I've been working on for over 20 years, I was stunned at actually how sensitive the insurers were to the standard of care that people got. Like you most of the time you hear a bad rap towards insurers, and there obviously are cases where that's true, but telemedicine, personalized medicine, all these things that are starting to emerge are going to remove a lot of the pain that I think we've gone through in the past. If I know, for example, Deb, that this treatment just isn't going to work on you based on your genome, right? That is going to be meaningful, and it will avoid a whole bunch of bad outcomes. So, interesting times.
Right. And If anything, I think in some cases, I mean, one of the benefits is going to be an earlier detection and or treatment of some things. I mean, one of the worst things is when, you, for whatever reason, you don't feel good, or maybe it's a checkup or whatever, but you're thinking, especially now with COVID, but you're always kind of cognizant. You don't want to go sit in a waiting room with somebody who's got cooties. I remember one time I was at the doctor, and it really was just annual checkup. I'm in there, and I'm reading my book, playing on my phone, doing whatever. And I can see this kid. Now, this kid's a little bit further away from me, so I'm not overly concerned, but I notice he's kind of fidgety, kind of scritchy, but he's a kid. And I heard somebody say he has chicken pox. Now, I am an adult and I have never had chicken pox. That is not a good combination. And so, I truck my little self up to the receptionist desk and I said, "Oh, by the way," and for one thing, it got me back into my appointment really fast. I mean, they went, "No, you need out of there." And, but yeah, I mean, how many times have we put off going to the doctor because for one thing, we didn't feel like going, right? You're running a temperature, you're feeling puny. I don't want to get in the car and go somewhere, or you don't want to go be exposed. But if I can just pick up my phone at midnight and talk, face to face, so it's not just that you're talking to them on the phone, you're video conferencing with them. I mean, that has got to be a benefit and an increase.
So think about it from the doc's perspective now too. You think they want to get in front of a kid with chicken pox? Do you think they want to get in a room with someone with an infectious disease? Absolutely not.
Right.
So what you're going to see emerging, and we're seeing it already, is this new kind of doctor that is, kind of like a UAV pilot in the war. They're not actually in theater. They're
Right.
in Arizona somewhere in the middle of the desert.
They got their little joystick.
But you're going to see these teledocs, not to steal the company name, but you're going to see these doctors who are social creatures, right? And they have social personas, and they have ratings, and they have cues associated with them, and you're going to try to get access to them, and they can actually practice medicine, a new kind of medicine, because okay, let's think about this, Deb. You have a stomach ache. Okay, well, if you were in the doctor's office, they might palpitate your stomach.
Right.
Okay, well, how do we do that if we can't be right? What are the new kinds of devices or technologies or analysis that have to happen to maintain to at least maintain the existing standard of care, and then to expand beyond it? Those are the things people are struggling with right now. But you're right. Not just predictive and avoidance of a bad event, but you're spot on. When we look back in 10 years and tally the amount of death and expense that happened because people were afraid of getting COVID, and so they steered away from hospitals. It's going to be mind-boggling.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they were talking about a cancer, even just annual checkups, things like that did not happen in 2020 because people were scared to go to the doctors.
Devastating for hospitals. Devastating for hospitals, right? So hospitals became infectious disease centers as opposed to
cootie farms.
Right. And so now here's where it gets really interesting. So and as a listener, you always want to be thinking about. So I could have said, oh well, maybe that means we create new kinds of barriers for people to use when they sit in waiting rooms. Maybe there's a whole new architectural opportunity for waiting room design. I don't know. But the hospitals now are getting their procedural volume back. So they're doing knees, and they're doing hips, and they're doing backs, and they're doing all that kind of stuff. At the same time that we're pushing hard into telemedicine, which pulls away from that environment. So they're trying to, economically, they have been hard hit, and now they're trying to coexist with this new world that, for whatever period of time, is going to be a remote care driven environment. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, healthcare really is one of those that we're just not sure. And I don't know. I mean, it's probably going to take years before it settles down into what I call it normal. The new normal, what that will be, but we've seen stuff shift, urgent care centers. I mean, 10 years ago, those didn't exist. because you just went to your family doctor. And if you didn't have a family doctor and then you went to the ER. I mean, there really wasn't anything in between.
But that was pre-pandemic,
right? That was 10-ish years ago.
That's right. So these new care facilities and this movement towards more disaggregated care has been going on. What I think is going to add a really interesting bit of spice into the meal that we're about to eat is, the administrations around the globe are going to be investing to drive recovery in their economies. Historically, that would generally mean infrastructure build out, right? New Deal kind of stuff. Well, we're in a 5G world now, and we've got a lot of fiber, and we're going to start to push a whole, smarter cities and autonomous vehicles and kiosk driven environments. And so you start to throw all this stuff together into the mix. And there are going to be a lot of different opportunities for people to serve the market.
Right.
So yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be, I think there's going to be a continuation of this movement into non-traditional care alternatives.
Right. And I think one of the things that a lot of people, I mean, we've alluded to it, we're going to be doing stuff online. I mean, and so if you're the professional speaker who traveled every week and was up in front of crowds, that is not going to happen for a variety of reasons. We're just not going to have conferences anymore. So you need to stop and think, okay, 1,000 people wanted to see me speak. So how do I change that so that those 1,000 people can now hear me speak while I'm sitting at home? So maybe it's that you've got the same product, but it's a twist to it,
Where I think, though, this, just from a growth strategist perspective, the danger of this new world is the potential that it provides. So you could do all these things. So post 9/11, 2008 crash, when the economy was in tatters, different ideas came up of what could be, and people got excited, and they invested in it, and they lost their shirts.
Right.
So timing is everything. And I think before you pull the trigger, one of my board members the other day said to me, you can't use 2020 as the basis for your go forward.
Right.
Right.
Because it's such an anomaly.
Yeah. And he's right and he's wrong. I think it's a little bit of both. There is a new. You can't go back to 2019. You cannot use that as your metric. There are things about it you can use. Like if you think back in 2019, what was our unemployment rate? It was really low, right? It was like 2.5%, 3%. One of the things when I was researching for the book in 2020, it's this incredible number of states. I want to say 18 states had both their lowest and their highest unemployment.
Yeah, they were really good at the start of the year, and then oops.
So there are things that are changing, but I think you've got to be really careful about seeing an opportunity and pulling the trigger on it as an entrepreneur. Not even larger companies are worried about this, but I'm talking to your entrepreneurial audience, making sure that it's not a flash in the pan, that there's a there that's going to sustain, and that you have a unique enough value that it's defensible, is critical.
Right. And it really is going to be interesting. And like you said, globally, it's just going to take so long because you might get control of the pandemic in one place, and we've obviously been seeing this happen, and other places it just goes unchecked.
Right.
And then they get it under control. And I mean, we don't even talk about third world countries, and granted, that's in many cases, for most of our businesses might not be something that pertains, but, you can't have a pandemic in one place. I mean, I remember when they were thinking, oh my gosh, there's Ebola. What are we going to do if that really starts spreading? If we can't get this pandemic in control around the world, it really, I mean, that is where we get the different variations, the mutations, all of those things.
That's right. But I'll offer that one of the statements you just made about, the third world countries don't impact us. Well, they do actually because of supply chain.
Right. True.
So one of the things we're seeing across industries is a disrupted supply chain. And the byproduct of that, the counterpunch, right? We always, life always finds a way, right? People are not going to just fall down and give up.
Right.
The companies always rebound. So you're going to see a lot of motion on circular economy and recycling and, partially recycled products, I think, emerging over the next few years that try to address that challenge of healthcare in, partner nations that are struggling more with the pandemic than hopefully we will be.
Right. And it's funny because, of course, in some of those areas, they're not hard hit because it's less dense population. They're, spread out more. I mean, all sorts of things. And so, it's an interesting to sit down and study those numbers to go, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. But it does when you really stop and dig into it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, oh my gosh, Cliff. We are almost at the top of the hour, and this is such fun. I could talk about this stuff forever because to me it's so interesting. I remember having these conversations post 9/11 because I was in corporate America then, and it was, what are we going to do? How are we going to go forward? And things like that. And of course we adapt, and whether it's individual, we whined and we carried on about, I have to take my shoes off at security at the airport. Now, I mean, there's a whole industry that sprung up with shoes that are easy to come on and come off. I mean, and then of course things like Clear, and all of those various things. But we adapt and we move on. It's bumpy, but it is it is a perfect time for many companies to really be thinking about growth. Yes, they should always be thinking about that, but now we've kind of had this little pause button. So it is the perfect time. And so that's what I love about your book coming out now is it's perfect timing for that. So again, it is called, I had it right here, Growing the Top Line. And so, we want to encourage folks to get that, but tell us a little bit more about what your company provides. Talk to us about Beacon.
Sure. Yeah. We're a growth strategy consulting firm. We've been around for, 20 years now. We help companies defend and grow their top line, and they're multinational corporations. So most of our work is international in scope. We tend to work for companies that have a science or technology that they bring to market, very solutions focused, enterprise and government customer focused. And I don't know, we're sort of the craft brew of strategy consulting firms. I think, we take a lot of pride in what we do, and we're very good at saying no when we can't do a good job. And I've got this amazing team that shares my passion for helping companies grow, and it shows in the work that we've been able to do.
I love it. I love it. Well, now, you talk about the Fortune 200s and the big guys of the world. What if you're a little guy? I mean, obviously your book is a great resource, but what do you have for the rest of us?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think the book is valuable, and it's valuable because it teaches process and how to think about stuff. It's kind of like, I don't know, we're in a do-it-yourself economy right now. So you go to Home Depot and you buy a piece of sheetrock and you hang it on the wall. But boy, it doesn't look the same as when you get somebody to come in and put it in professionally. It's their process, right, and their technique that really has that impact. And I think we teach a lot of that in the book. We also, have made available all of our white papers during the pandemic to review, and so I think people will find them interesting, and they can find them on beacongroupconsulting.com. So it's BEACONGROUP consulting.com.
Perfect.
And I mean, go in, poke around. If you have questions, reach out. We're happy to chat with you about how we might be useful. And just think hard and then pivot. Don't just be too opportunistic. Right
Don't think you're going to have the next pet rock.
Hey, God bless you if you do. But
I know.
How do you make the pet avalanche, right? You don't just want that one rock.
Yep. So. I love it. Well, if someone wants to connect with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, the consulting, beacongroupconsulting.com is the best way to do it. And, we're happy to have a chat and discuss, ways we could help you grow.
Perfect. I love it. Well, this really is fascinating, and we should do this again in maybe a year, because things will hopefully have settled by then. We'll be in our new normal, which obviously is just preparing for the next big upheaval. And things just don't go along smoothly. That'd be boring aside from anything else.
Life is organic. That's right.
Right. And so we'll have to do this again. But do you have any final thoughts you want to leave everyone with?
No, Deb, I think don't give up, right? Take heart. There is opportunity in every market. And the challenge right now is, I think, following the money, right? Making sure you know where there's opportunity and then focusing your time and effort on winning that opportunity. And doing it with an eye towards where, markets are likely moving is probably the best bet right now. So that's about it.
I love it. I love it. Well, I really have been having an absolutely wonderful time. I'm Deb Creer. I've been talking with Cliff Farrah, who is President, CEO, and Chairman of the Board of the Beacon Group. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.